you so much, Valeria, for this introduction. All right, so I'm Yael Tamar, and I'm the CEO of Top of Blockchain, as well as a consultant to various ICOs, which is sort of like a hobby of mine in addition to promoting this little known technology called blockchain. So we'll talk a little bit about Israel and the ecosystem here. But before, I want to ask you guys, can somebody tell me here what's the point of innovation? Anyone?
Solving problems.
Solving problems. Anything else?
Expressing creativity.
Expressing creativity, that's a good one. So expressing creativity could be kind of making our lives better, right? Making our life better. Anything else? For small countries like Israel, it could be opening doors to new markets, expanding our horizons, right? So solving a problem is an obvious one. We picked up a stick, made a wheel. Make our lives better is something that we're always looking to do as a human race, and opening new opportunities. I'm here to tell you about the Israeli people and ecosystem and how these qualities are inherent in our behavior and in our culture, and that's what contributes to Israel being the startup nation and now moving into the blockchain space as the obvious part of the evolution. So Israel has a very well-developed startup ecosystem with over 6,000 startups that are not only registered there, but are actually operational. It's actually the highest number of startups per capita in the world, and it's ranked number 2 in the world as far as the funding is concerned and the type of technologies, innovative technologies that are being exported all over the world. Who knows what's the number 1 startup ecosystem in the world? Anyone? You guys speak English? So that would be the Silicon Valley, right? So there are over 250 R&D centers for corporations all over the world, as well as a huge number of accelerators. However, it hasn't always been this way. Israel was actually a socialist country, and the startup ecosystem was developed as a result of the government's effort to attract capital inside the country and developing high-tech industry as a part of this innovative approach by the government. So in 1993, after the slowdown that the Israeli economy experienced, the government decided to invest over $100 million in a fund called Yozma, and they co-invested with a variety of funds coming from abroad. So this was very successful. The startup ecosystem started to develop. These first-time entrepreneurs within 5 or 6 years became second-time entrepreneurs, and it attracted a multitude of corporations to come to Israel. And this model has been replicated since then all over the world in many European countries, Asian countries, and so on. So we've exported this model all over the world. In addition, Israel is a small country. So we have about 8 million people, 20,000 square meters in area. So we don't have much natural resources. So high-tech is pretty much what we're exporting. It's actually accounting for 70% of all manufacturing effort. It's basically high-tech goods. And for about 15% of all of GDP, and 25% of the labor force is all high-tech. So in the last 25 years, Israel has become this powerhouse of high-tech, and startups are a big, big part of that. In addition to developing the startup ecosystem, Israel has attracted a lot of multinationals by the virtue of tax breaks and other incentives to come and establish R&D centers. Israel is number one in number of engineers per capita. Silicon Valley is trailing by 1 or 2 percentage points. I think it's, I wouldn't lie, so I don't remember the number, but it's the number 1 in the world, and engineers, PhDs, research done in universities and so on. So, and that's also partially because of the government influence. So There are other types of there are other reasons why entrepreneurship is kind of inherent in the Israeli culture, and one is thanks to the compulsory military service that everybody has to do from the age of 18 to 20 or 21. Number one, the majority of units in the Israeli Defense Force are not combat units, but rather technological units dealing with security, intelligence, IT, and so on. So when somebody enters the labor force in Israel, chances are they've seen many of these technologies or learned this in the army. In addition, a lot of entrepreneurs are meeting their future co-founders in the army, and they have a big advantage of having gone through this specific experience for 2 or 3 years of their lives. The defense industry is very big in Israel, and there are a lot of spillovers into the civilian industry from the technologies. So geographically, as I said, it's a very small country. People can work together, shoulder to shoulder with relative ease, because it takes about a maximum of 8 hours to get from the very top to the very bottom of Israel. In addition, it seems like the degrees of separation are very low in Israel, and everybody seems to know everybody else. So you can easily get to the CEOs of a company that you need to get to penetrate the market. I think that might be also similar to Switzerland, being like this tight ecosystem, at least in the blockchain space. And finally, Israel is an immigrant country. Over 20% of people in Israel are either immigrants or they were born to immigrants, which basically brings the global perspective. People are familiar with these markets, and because outside of Israel, and because Israel is so small, most startups already start out by building products for the global market. And most startups don't even use Israel as a pilot ground, although some do. And because of this global outlook, we're looking for global problems they have in South America, in Europe and Asia. And then we're solving those problems. And that also accounts for the success of the Israel startup industry. So blockchain has not evaded the attention of both the entrepreneurs in Israel as well as the government. So remember how the government of Israel is always looking for opportunities to create a bigger market, to open the horizons. The country is very small. We have to make money somehow. So blockchain was the obvious new stage of high tech, which the economy is going through. So the government realized it and right away adopted different grants and incentives, both to the public and the private sector. So the universities got many grants to do research. And a lot of people right away started doing research and regulation. So Israel realized early on that regulation is going to be very important, and we're going to find out why in just a few slides. And in addition, there is one specific particular authority that was very psyched when they learned about the potential of cryptocurrency because of the additional income that it could bring, and that was the tax authority. They realized that this could be the solution to solve the black market in Israel, which is about 22% of the whole economy, or $70 billion annually. So the Israeli Tax Authority has started working really early on this, and I think will pioneer this whole industry of blockchain all over the world with respect to how it's going, how we're going to treat tokens and the financial services and so on in terms of taxation. So about 20% of the market in Israel is now blockchain related or crypto related. There have been a series of successful ICOs last year, most notably with a company called Bancor, which raised $153 million. The overall ecosystem, the global ecosystem, is not much different to the Israeli ecosystem. However, in Israel, a lot of people have realized that because the ICOs are slowing down, and this whole industry that was born out of the ICOs, the industry of consulting and the marketing and the social media, all this industry which generated millions and millions of dollars, is now winding down. We have to find new avenues and new ways to make money with blockchain. So now we're looking at exchanges, of course, and we're looking at asset management. We're looking at financial instruments and hedging and other things that you can do with the crypto, in addition to, of course, the development of blockchain technologies. We know that the adoption of blockchain technologies is lacking. So many of the startups that have developed these platforms or other blockchain solutions are also looking for ways to make money in the meantime. So they're providing platforms for ICOs or platforms for some sort of crypto-related services. So Israel actually is, Tel Aviv is number 5 in the world for Bitcoin accepting cities. So the regulators in Israel, instead of fighting this trend of cryptographic boom and taking the route like many other governments did, like South Korea, like the United States and many others, banning ICOs or banning cryptocurrency in their country, the regulator decided we're gonna approach this head on, and what we're gonna do is we're going to allocate resources to figuring out how crypto is going to look in the future, because we're going to look at business models that are going to exist a year, 2 or 3 years from now. And we're going to lead this process of regulation. Why? Because our country is desperate for money. We need to expand our markets. We don't have much else besides high tech in the country. So Israel took a very, very proactive approach, and it created a special committee. It actually, Israel is not afraid of legislation, so many other countries are kind of passive. So Switzerland is very accepting, but kind of passive on legislation, on changing laws and putting them in effect. Israel is the opposite. We like the legislative process, and we have a very thorough process. So usually the government appoints a special committee which learns from the market, learns from the leaders of the market, and actually communicates with us, communicates with blockchain and crypto leaders and business owners to understand what our needs are going to be, and then it solves their needs. So that's exactly what happened. There was a framework for the law that came forward sometime spring 2018 that actually examines potential crypto use cases where regulation is important. And Israel didn't look just at ICOs or fundraising processes for crypto. It looked specifically into the cases for financial services and how financial firms are going to operate with crypto, and how financial firms are going to need to protect their clients and also other financial institutions. So, for example, Israel is looking into cases for KYC and AML, and requiring, of course, every financial services institution to provide that information. But on top of that, it's requiring to provide the Ethereum address or the wallet address of the recipient of the funds and of the sender. So on top of that, there's special cases where that's not enough, and there are different provisions being made. For example, when the IP of the sender doesn't match the geolocation, or the IP is anonymous. Also, using anonymous coins like Monero and Zcash requires some additional measures for the financial services firm to provide that information to the regulator. Of course, the most interesting case is that every crypto trader or any firm that deals in crypto in Israel is going to need a dealer's license. So the regulator is basically saying, we're going to support you. We're going to give you all the tools. We want to leave no stone unturned. We want to have laws and regulations that protect the market, because they want confidence. They want market to be confident. They want market to be protected, because they see this market, blockchain and crypto, as a potential opportunity for Israel to lead the world. So to recap, in the beginning of the year, so the tax authority also issued a circular on the taxation of digital tokens. So in Israel, tokens are basically an asset, taxable by capital gains and VAT. And in March 2018, the Securities Authority released a report which kind of gave the market the guidelines to go by, and we're waiting for the legislation to come out this month. On top of that, the Securities Authority has implemented blockchain in order to actually start the work on collecting these additional taxes. So citizens now will be able to use the mobile device to pay their taxes, which provides them with this instantaneous way to pay, right? And some sort of a convenience for payment. And on the other hand, it's going to provide the regulators and the tax authority more information on who's making the payment and where the money is coming from. Last week, in an unprecedented case, the Israeli tax authority, the main leaders who are sitting there and making all these laws, came out to speak to us, to all the crypto and blockchain influencers, and the people who are writing these very laws sitting in the same room answering questions, which I think is incredible. So this is the guy, Roland Amshalom, who is the Senior Deputy Director General at the Tax Authority. He basically said that he believes in the blockchain industry, and I believe in the blockchain industry, and confirm that the Tax Authority will do its best to establish a clear set of rules for the industry to flourish. The industry will work with the Tax Authority to point problems and possible solutions, and work in the blockchain field will influence other authorities to regulate and clarify the field in the near future. So not only Israel wants to create these guidelines for the country, it's also understanding, judging from the previous experience of exporting Israeli innovation and innovation frameworks, that we're going to be able to export these models to other countries. How we're going to be benefiting from it? Well, global cooperation. Israel cannot exist by itself. Like, all our markets are pretty much overseas. We need these agreements, bilateral and multilateral agreements with a multitude of countries. So we need to interest these countries in coming to Israel, learning about what we do, and cooperating with us. And that's exactly what's happening between Switzerland and Israel. There's a cooperation that has been signed, and the Swiss authorities are in Israel learning about what we do. And we're in Israel are benefiting from the huge infrastructure of banks and institutions that is existing in Switzerland. On top of that, like some other governments in Russia and Argentina, I think, Israeli government is working on our own digital shekel, and of course that's an effort of the government to collect more taxes and to create a more transparent market to operate in. Who knows this guy? What's his name? Bibi Netanyahu, who is the Prime Minister of Israel. Has any other leader in the world come out and said, banks will not exist? That's it for the banks. Okay, maybe not tomorrow, maybe you have a few more years. Okay, but we don't know if it's Bitcoin, but that's what's going to happen. Right, so maybe next year the president or the Prime Minister of Switzerland is going to come out and say that? No, that won't happen, right? And that's why we need Swiss banks to come and to provide services. In fact, Israeli banks have been very uncooperative when it comes to opening accounts for companies that deal with crypto. Obviously, everybody in the market agrees that the banks are slightly afraid of what's happening, and that's why they are being uncooperative. However, again, the Israeli authorities, the very Supreme Court, came out and said to the biggest bank of Israel, you cannot close the account of this exchange. So that's exactly what they did. There is a company called Bits of Gold, which is exchange for Bitcoin. The bank closed, basically essentially wanted to close their account, froze all their operations. And the Supreme Court came and said, you cannot do that. You have to open and you have to give them the opportunity to conduct their operations in Israel, which is where they are. However, unfortunately, the banks still say that there's not enough regulation for them to go by to allow this sort of activity, and most of the Israeli companies dealing with crypto are registered either in Switzerland or in Malta or in Gibraltar or in Lithuania. However, I think this month or next month, the government is going to come out with ICO regulations as well. And it seems like they're gonna we're going to follow the path of the SEC in terms of issuing clear guidance on what the ICOs are going to look like. and how they should be conducted, and then the banks with that and the crypto regulation for financial services, the banks will have no choice. However, the government has realized that this aspect is lacking, so now it has invited the Swiss banks to come to Israel. I'm not sure if that's for the purpose of providing retail or commercial services to crypto companies, but that would be my guess. Like as I mentioned, the Israeli government and in general the people and the entrepreneurs are problem solvers. So once we see that there is a problem with the banks, we have to solve it. So people are working on a solution proactively. So Israel and Switzerland. So Switzerland obviously is a nation of banks and experienced people in this industry with a wealth of knowledge, and which is enviable, obviously, for the Israeli industry. However, Israeli entrepreneurs and organizations, regulators, and the government seem to be much less averse to risk and taking much more proactive approach. So I think there is actually a great opportunity for sharing of the knowledge and cooperation between the two ecosystems here. So to recap, the role of the government in creating, first of all, the startup nation and now the blockchain nation is financial support that the startups are receiving. The chief scientist of Israel is working, has provided already a variety of grants to blockchain companies developing this new industry. There is a forward-looking and approachable regulator and that is willing to work with us to solve our needs. There are developed tax schemes also for encouragement of capital in this industry, as well as for anything concerning the regulation. The country is working really hard on creating the ecosystem, for, all kinds of new accelerators and schemes for blockchain, and of course we view crypto and blockchain as a source of revenue. All right. And what's new for crypto? Well, obviously anywhere in the world, it's security tokens. In Israel, the regulators and the market is looking to financial institutions and financial products, all kinds of new financial services. Remember, we talked about how innovation is about opening new opportunities and new markets. So we're looking for creating new business models and perhaps a new and improved crowdfunding process for based on blockchain. New financial instruments, because with the emergence of this financial industry, we'll see a lot of trading and platforms and a lot of innovation in this type of financial instruments that we'll see, the derivatives perhaps based on crypto. And the last one, and it's actually in discussion in Israel, is employee benefits when they're paid in crypto. Specifically, the tax authority is looking into it because at the moment, the way it's structured with crypto being an asset, if an employee receives a benefit, like they would say receive options, they have to pay taxes on it immediately, and the regulator is actually moving towards the scheme where they wouldn't have to do that. So also to encourage crypto even within corporations. And this, by the way, will create this new economy of investment, right? So if you have these crypto assets already, then you might as well use them for further investment in financial instruments, perhaps some sort of an alternative fund to the pension fund, especially when we have the security token. So in light of all of what we discussed, one new industry which is going to become really relevant is the RegTech, regulation technology, precisely because all of the financial industry will have to pass through stringent controls that actually will vary upon the use case. So as we discussed, there is a use case which is quite simple, when there's simple KYC, AML, with a simple transfer of non-autonomized currencies. And then there are some other cases where the regulator will require financial institutions to provide much more stringent due diligence. And that's what these RegTech companies will provide. The blockchain industry in Israel, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of a few startups that will hopefully provide like this view of the ecosystem. So Israel is very big on fintech in general, and so not surprisingly, there are lots of startups in this space. One that I particularly like is Koti. It's a DAG-based platform for payment networks and stable coins. DAG is a similar infrastructure to blockchain. It's a decentralized ledger technology as well, but one that provides opportunities for scalability, much faster transactions, and there are quite a few DAG-based firms in Israel actually working mainly in the payment sector. Carrots is a diamond-backed stable coin, and the people behind this company are basically former Diamond executives, and the CEO is the former CEO of the Diamond Exchange in Israel. Infrastructure, of course, is very big, especially because adoption of blockchain is lagging. So it reminds me actually of about early 2000s with a cyber security boom where especially Israel was involved in creating a lot of cybersecurity platforms that were associated with the rise of the internet. The internet itself was not developed enough to have all these apps that we're seeing now, but the cybersecurity was a big hit back then. So the same is happening with many platforms. So Bancor is the one that raised $153 million and had and basically it's a platform for creating coins and assets as well as an exchange. Orbs is transforming blockchain into DAG for products and projects that want faster and more efficient transactions. Iolite is a platform streamlining smart contracts, allowing professionals to write smart contracts with natural language. Security is a big field in Israel in general. Like I mentioned, the defense industry spillover. So the two notable cases here that I like is a Kirobo, which turns any wallet into this sort of a smart wallet, on-chain wallet, where if somebody were to die or lose their keys, and then the inactivity in their wallet for over 6 months will cause the funds to be transferred in the wallet of your choice. So this actually solves a huge problem of a lot of money floating around due to these lost keys or death. And Hasera is actually a company that's creating a flexible enterprise-grade blockchain. We haven't talked a lot in this conference, I think, about the permissioned blockchain and the enterprise market. Or we did a little bit with the logistics and the supply chain, but in general, even though there are many projects that are in pilot stages with these enterprises, we haven't seen a lot of adoption here. So, and I think it's in part because of lack of interoperability between different blockchains and the lack of communication in general. So, and the Hasera is working on that with their blockchain as well as on security, such as AML and KYC and much more beyond. Supply chain. We talked a little bit about the supply chain before. Speakers before me. Alam is an interesting project creating an open source platform for logistics and the supply chain for everybody to see and the transparently the information passed along the different layers. The interesting fact about this company is that it's actually a Swiss company, Israeli operated, and they're partnering with Swissport as well as Kuhn & Nagel, and their advisors are former DHL executives. So if this project succeeds, they will cover about 15% of the overall logistic market because of the nature of the partnerships that they have. There are a variety of applications, and as Valeria mentioned, vegan coin. As a vegan, I got involved with this unlikely ICO possibly, but it's doing really well and raised quite a lot of money up until now, and already operational and working, signing out partners. So the crowd sale is happening next month, and this is a company that's just going to provide financial services for the vegan businesses, and I think that's a very good and easy to understand value proposition. Let's see what else. Dnetics is placing and tokenizing DNA information, creating a marketplace for health prevention services and using this DNA information. There are, of course, exchanges, as we talked about, Bits of Gold and CoinMama, and the crypto asset managers, notably Silver Castle and First. And actually, there are not so many in Israel. And why there are not so many? Because the regulation. So Silver Castle actually just received the license, and it's fully regulated investment house in Israel, and providing liquidity services, treasury management services for ICOs, as well as, of course, setting up funds and setting up financial instruments for institutional and private investors. And thank you so much for listening. I hope that I hope that you learned something from the presentation. I'll be happy to speak to anybody who wants to establish any sort of partnerships in Israel, or maybe come to Israel and learn, or just be in touch about anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yael. Yeah, it was a nice presentation, and we shall continue